Following the targeted US strike on American-born Imam Anwar Awlaki, questions have arisen over the legality of these methods. Are these strikes legal under international law? Is America acting immorally? Tune in to this edition of The Agenda with our expert panel to find out more.
There was much jubilation in Washington after it emerged US-born Imam Anwar Awlaki had been killed in a targeted US strike in Yemen. President Obama remarked the death of Anwar Awlaki to be another significant milestone in the fight against al-qaeda. But there is now outrage among American and other human rights groups who believe that Obama is developing a new aggressive strategy which does away with trial by jury. While the US has used drone attacks to kill those they see as a threat to them, many questions have arisen over the legality of these killings, particularly following the killing of Awlaki. While some accepted the assassination of Osama Bin Ladin as inevitable, the latest killing is on a US citizen. Such killing also holds away with the need of Guantanamo, where 170 detainees are still held in a legal black hole. Today's agenda asks the question, America, is it adhering to international law?
Has America acted illegally by carrying out assassinations using drones? These concerns have been highlighted by the recent assassination of Anwar al-Awlaki by a drone strike in Yemen. The fact that he was a US citizen has added a further dimension to the already questionable legal basis that the US claims it operates within. And here to discuss these issues are our esteemed panel of guests. First up is Andy Worthington, a freelance investigative journalist specializing in Guantanamo and the War on Terror. He's the author of the Guantanamo Files, and he believes that there are profound doubts about the legality of drone attacks in general and also the drone assassination of US citizens. Next to him is Robert Ools, director of the right-wing think tank, the Bruges Group, who believes that the actions of the US are completely legitimate and that people like Anwar al-Awlaki are legitimate targets. And our final guest is Dr. Sheharar Ali, a prominent member of the Green Party and an outspoken critic of US-UK anti-terror legislation. He has campaigned for the release of Guantanamo detainees and spoken out against secret agencies' commission of torture and extraordinary rendition since 9/11. He's the author of the best-selling book, Why Vote Green? A very warm welcome to the programme. I would like to start with you, Sheharar, with regards to this situation and of the drone attacks and so on going on. Why the latest outrage? Surely this is another tool of war.
Well, there are many aspects and causes for concern. First of all, there was no judicial process. There was no trial. There was no judge saying, OK, you can go out now and assassinate, take out this person. Also, the mechanism used, which is a robot, mechanization of war is nothing new. However, this is one or more steps removed from an actual physical pilot doing the killing, and therefore it brings into question accountability, proper accountability for who is actually making the targeted killing, who is making the call. There are scores of people actually involved in piloting such a drone. Who is actually making the call? So there are questions, there are moral and legal questions surrounding the legality of this and the morality of this. Taking somebody out without a judicial process, this is highly counterproductive, not just in terms of whether those terrorist organisations then feel somehow more indignant and survive for longer, and there's evidence to show that they will, and moreover there's questions to do with the actual morality of doing this in the first place.
Robert, I saw you shaking your head at that. I mean, surely you can't disagree with the idea that there has been no judicial process. How are you going to deal with that aspect of it?
Well, people that are subject to such attacks operate outside of the law. They're operating outside of nation states. Who are they accountable to? They're not accountable to anyone but themselves and their own terrorist organisation. They're operating in countries which are not the United States. Therefore, US law the judicial system doesn't apply. What is the alternative? The alternative is to take action which would eliminate them as a potential threat. That is the best way forward. That's the way that peace will be delivered.
And if I can pick up on that, there is no way that the US can apply any kind of judicial process. Its hands are tied. I'm paraphrasing, but so therefore there is no other thing that can be done apart from having these drone attacks happening, in the way that they do in Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I think we're dealing on the one hand with warfare. On the other hand, I think this has been a problem from the start of the Bush administration's war on terror, that when we're dealing with terrorism, we're actually dealing with crime. We're dealing with criminals. So in theory, I think there is a judicial angle to be taken and the possibility of trials being held. But when it comes to warfare, I mean, what we've been seeing, you know, what's been happening for many years now in Pakistan seems, you know, very indiscriminate. The collateral damage on civilians has been enormous. And we've had, you know, we've had profound doubts expressed in the United Nations at the highest levels about exactly what's going on, what the program is, who's in charge of it, as you were saying. You know, and I don't think that we've really moved beyond that. I think what we've got here is a kind of, you know, experimental, very modern technique that the United States declares is warfare and is acceptable, but that we haven't had it challenged properly. And I really don't think that the loss of other lives while apparently taking out the right targets is acceptable at all. You know, if we add up what's happened in Pakistan, hundreds or thousands of people have died as a result of these regular attacks, which have been stepped up under the Obama administration.
Robert, in the light of what Andy has said, how can it be justified that this collateral damage in the scale that it's taking place can carry on, and somehow we can say that these drone attacks, as robotics, controlling it, mechanization, etc., is justified?
Well, when civilians are killed, that, of course, is deeply regrettable. But, of course, what's important to remember is that they are not the target of these attacks. The people that...
They don't feel that way.
The people that are being targeted are the ones who actually intentionally seek to kill civilians. And, of course, we need to remember that the people in charge of these drone attacks are actually accountable to democratic institutions. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, is, of course, democratically elected and is accountable to a free and fair media and, of course, the electorate and, of course, the judicial process in the United States if, of course, any mistakes are made. The terrorists that are being killed as a result of drone attacks are not accountable to anyone but themselves. And if Obama makes a mistake, he will be held accountable by the American judicial process. That is a big difference we need to remember.
Accountable in a democracy, so therefore there is accountability, therefore justified. Shahrar.
No, there's no real accountability here, and Robert makes a very wishful distinction, if I may say. It's not good enough to say we didn't want those civilian deaths that are associated with the intended target. You willfully brought about those...
Killing that target will save lives in the long run.
You willfully brought about a situation in which people were inevitably going to be killed as a result. And this happens all the time. It could be people... firing guns in jubilation of a wedding, being misidentified, or it could be people who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. You have the luxury of not being in the wrong place at the wrong time, so you think, but you could be. So there are grave considerations to be at play here, and we cannot counsel or allow this kind of extrajudicial killing completely outside the confines of law with no accountability, no actual transparent decision-making. There could be misidentification, and it actually results in an erosion of human rights legislation around the world. We can't be an advocate for it whilst we counsel and advocate this kind of tactic.
Let's take a look at how the Awlaki story in particular has had an impact.
The Bush era has been perceived by many to be bad enough with its so-called anti-terror legislation. And some have even argued this was precisely the reason which laid the foundation for the election of Obama. In fact, it seems Obama has taken Bush's so-called anti-war legislation even further. He learnt from Bush's mistakes that the best thing to do with people you don't like is not to imprison them, but in fact to take no prisoners, literally, and to wipe them out. This Wild West style of running American foreign policy has always raised questions, but with the increase of video game-style drone attacks, or as perhaps some would say drone assassinations, this has become a serious current problem in the ethics of conflict. This has been brought into sharp focus by recent assassinations in Yemen by American drones of an American citizen, Imam Anwar Awlaki. By denying one of its citizens a right to a trial, the right to due process, the American regime has openly said to its own citizens that if we don't like you, we can kill you, at a time and place of our choosing. While many would argue that America has always flouted international law, this has gone a step too far with the killing of one of its own citizens in a drone attack on foreign soil.
Let's take this point to our guest, Robert. This is a step too far, surely, as it's been said in there. Killing one of its own citizens on foreign soil, how can you possibly justify that?
Well, Obama has always been very clear. Before he was elected president, in the presidential election campaigns, he always advocated the use of troops going into other countries to take out terrorist threats. That has always been his open policy, and he was elected partly on that platform. And really, we need to remember that the needs of security come first. Peace will be achieved when people such as al-awlaki are eliminated, and that sends a very powerful message that these...
So these threats, who you classified, that America classifies as a threat, are justified as to be taken out. Well, that America classified. So, for example, Mozambique having been taken out, that would have been justified?
Well, there's certain people who are clearly a threat.
Well, America, I think, thought that Mozambique was a threat. And so, therefore, it would have been justified under Obama to have taken him out, whereas Bush put him in Guantanamo.
Well, al-awlaki was a very senior person within al-qaeda. That is undeniable. He was one of their sort of de facto leaders, in a sense.
I think that isn't undeniable. I think that's part of the problem with it, is that what we have here is a man who was very skilled at putting out a message in English on the internet, which remains there. I'd say it's very counterproductive having taken him out, because his message remains, and now he's been martyred by the United States. We don't have evidence that he was an operational commander in any sense. He was a propagandist. What troubled the Obama administration, and I understand that, was that he was a very successful propagandist because of his command of the English language, being American and using the internet. But I don't think that makes him a legitimate military target, and I worry as well about the counterproductive nature of martyring somebody whose message will now be amplified as a result of what's happened.
Just taking this idea of the security threat, you know, that it's somehow okay to do it because of that. Where does this argument sit? Because everyone wants security, don't they? So, therefore, there's some justification? Shahrat?
It's counterproductive. And there's a study shown, University of Chicago study by Jenna Jordan. She looked at cases, terrorist cells or units where this kind of assassination took place, and discovered that the longevity of the organisation was increased from, say, 67% on a kind of a default to 87%. Therefore, it's counterproductive. What happens is that other people will emerge. They may be more radical or intransigent. As Andy has already pointed out, there is a tendency then for people to act in greater defiance. So it's counterproductive on its own terms. It doesn't actually result in security in the long term. It's highly morally questionable, and actually I would say dubious, to sort of suppose that because every presidential term somebody has in a very general way said that these kind of tactics are allowable, that then you can go further. In fact, Obama has pursued these tactics on the order of 10 times more than Bush before him. So he's using it more, and it's reducing accountability. You're going to be assassinating people who have had no opportunity to give their case, and without any legal representation, mistakes will occur. As you already pointed out, if we had had this kind of law of the Wild West operating with Guantanamo detainees, then Mozambique and others wouldn't be back to tell their story. What a great injustice.
And I think that's the issue, isn't it? I mean, the whole thing, the Wild West kind of style of foreign policy that America has adopted, it can do what it wants.
Well, that's a stereotypical comment about Americans, when, of course, America is much more than the West. Obama is clearly not some cowboy. He's taking a security decision to protect civilian lives, not just American lives. We're talking about al-qaeda attacks that have been taking place in Indonesia, in Africa, of course in other nations around the world. This is about global security.
But this global security, we come back to that argument over and over again. Andy, where'd you go with this?
Well, you know, I agree, and I've read you know, research to indicate that it's counterproductive. But you know, I know
I disagree.
You were shaking your head on
my own research.
Well, I understand that, you know, that different research projects can reach different conclusions. I would say over the last 10 years, you know, what the United States has done in its war on terror and how Obama has now reinterpreted